Please know, wherever this life goes, this will be your home. You're never alone.
Hello and welcome to This Day Devo Sunday Special. My name is Pastor Guy. It's an honor to have you here listening or watching today. This Sunday Special, these are conversations with people about work that they're doing for the Lord, work they're doing in the kingdom, in and through sometimes One Life Church, sometimes other areas of ministry. But point in case, every time we have a guest or a conversation or something that we want to talk about, we'll throw these out on Sundays for you to enjoy on the Devo feed. And so today I'm sitting here with Rod and Lisa Keller, and we are going to have a nice long conversation about missions and talk about their heart for missions and talk about the work that they've been doing through Moving Mountains Missions in Guatemala since all the way back to 2007 and forming their own mission group in 2014, and some of the incredible work that they've done, the relationships that they've built, and the willingness that they have in stepping out in faith and stepping out of their comfort zone and taking big risks for the Lord and in big leaps in a way that can be challenging but also is defining and growing in your faith and in your maturity. And so by way of introduction, the name of their mission agency is Moving Mountains Mission, which is now working with One Life Church, has been for a couple years now. And so the name, my understanding is the name Moving Mountain Missions comes from a couple places in Scripture, but in Matthew chapter 17, verse 20, Jesus said, "I tell you the truth, if you had faith, even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it would move. Nothing would be impossible." So Rod and Lisa, welcome to This Day Devo Sunday Special. Good to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So there will be some people listening to this from the church, and some people that know you very well and personally. And then I'm sure there will be people out there that don't know anything about you, anything about moving mountains, anything about what you do. And so by way of introduction, why don't you just let us know who are you? Who are Rod and Lisa Keller?
We are just plain ordinary people is who we are. I've been a warehouse worker for 35 years, working in a food warehouse, and my wife is an elementary school teacher.
So everyday people living your life and following Jesus, and now you find yourselves doing mission work 1,000 miles away, changing lives. So let's jump in with talk kind of about your faith journey of what brought you to 2007 when you first got into missions. Did you grow up around missions? Were you involved in missions? What was the foundation of that fire being lit in your heart?
Rod and I have kind of different experiences with that. For me, I just always thought that mission work would be part of what I would do in my life. Even as a small child, we talked about like mission Sundays in our church. And, for some people, mission Sundays, that's a great Sunday to stay home because pastor doesn't have a message. And for me, it was like, we got to go early. We got to get the front seat. And I just remember just sitting there as a small child and hearing the stories of people who are just out doing work for Jesus. And my heart would just like be on fire. And I would think, someday maybe I want to do that. And I remember one particular group that came in. I have no idea who they were or what they did, but I remember that their mission involved taking Bibles across the world. And at the end of their program, like they invited us down for like a meet and greet in the basement. And I remember the missionaries coming around and they asked each of us, do you have your own Bible? And I said no, which was like bad for my family because
Your mom was probably like,
yeah,
oh,
she
no.
did. Yeah. Like we had lots of Bibles in our house, but like none were mine. And so like a couple weeks later, I get this special delivery in the mail, and it was my very first Bible for me. And it was a Revised Standard Version, and they engraved my name on the cover. And I remember my mom and dad be like, you can't do this. There are people across the world that don't have Bibles, and we have Bibles all over the house. But this one for me, it was like the first Bible I could read and understand, because we had like the traditional King James Version that was really hard for a young learner to understand. Yeah. And I just remembered how cool that would be to go out and take the word of the Lord to people in a language that they could understand. And so for me, I just always thought someday. But, we all know that for most of us, we have a lot of excuses that get in the way, marriage and children and all of those things. And I just found myself that every time like we thought about missions, there were always excuses. I can't go because I'm a school teacher, and you can't take time off in January very easily. And our girls were very young. And something that I've always found is I'm so grateful that God is so patient with our excuses, but he never stops asking. And I just remember the day I ran out of excuses. A mission opportunity presented itself. And it was not during the school year. And it was a mission trip that was designed for families so we could take our girls with us. And I just remember feeling like, okay, Lord, you've been so patient with me for a really long time, and you've allowed me to exhaust my excuses. There are no more excuses. It's time for me to serve. And so for me, I always thought that this would be part of my life plan. I had no clue where God would be leading me. I just thought I would take that trip and have that experience, and I would come back and I would be blessed. I had no idea that this would be a path that God would just literally plow in front of us and point us in the right direction.
Amen.
Well, I grew up in a rural country church, and a lot of the people who attended that church were farmers. Not so much now, but back then, almost all of them were. And every time the missionaries came around, they would always try to get some of the farm boys to go on a mission trip. And I never really put two and two together. And my dad told me one day, well, it's because you kids that work on the farm, you know how to use hammers and do things, and you know how to work.
Yeah.
And they had tried to recruit me on a youth trip when I was in high school, but I was getting ready to graduate from high school, and I was working at the time. It just didn't fit, and it was just something that never transpired. And I never really, thought much more about it after that. I mean, at the time, I thought, it would be neat to go to Jamaica or one of those places where they were going, But I never really thought much about it until, a friend of ours that was beginning this mission in Guatemala, he invited us to go along with him. We didn't really think that was going to transpire, though, for a while, because he said he'd get back to us, and we never heard. Like February rolled around, I believe it was, or was it March, Lisa? She will correct me. And you know what? She'd probably be better at telling this part of the story than myself.
Yeah, that's great, Rod. I love your childhood stories, because you both grew up in Christian homes, in churches. So you grew up in Christian homes that missions was understood and valued. Like Rod, your dad understood what mission was like. Your dad really loved the Lord, as a man of faith, and same for you, Lisa. And so they weren't missionaries, but they were faithful church people, church leaders, and church givers. And so probably like a lot of my ancestors, my parents and grandparents, like they weren't missionaries. Don't really even go on a mission trip. I don't know of any of my parents or grandparents that have been on mission trips, like short-term mission trips, like we're talking about. But yet they primarily support through prayer and giving Christian missions because they love it, they get it, they see the need, they want to see. They're not called to go, right, in the evangelism and all that, but but when others are, they want to get behind them. And so, and the reality is that's truly what it is going to be for most people. But it's neat for me that how both of you can pull little stories out of your childhood and say these mission seeds were being planted even back then, and then you would eventually come together and get married, but not get married in a sense of where like, hey, let's go out on the mission field together. You both, you stayed in your hometown, you got normal jobs, and you settled in and started living your life, raising your girls, and then sometime about close to 2007, that sort of started to shift for you.
Yeah. Well, that invitation to go, as I said, all along, I don't even know that Rod and I ever had a conversation about wanting to go on a mission trip. We might have, we might have been, it'd be great to go to Russia and help to, hand out these teddy bears and things like that. But, that invitation to go is exactly what a lot of people just need. They need that invitation from a friend. Come with me. And so we had a little conversation and we decided, this would be something that we would be interested in doing. So we knew nothing about Guatemala. I mean, I literally went to the map to make sure I knew exactly where we were going. The next day, my girls were little. They were 11 and 6 at the time. And so we went to the public library here in Punxsutawney and we checked out books on Guatemala. I think we were the first person to have checked those books out for a very long time. But we wanted to study the culture and we wanted to study the people, and I wanted the kids to have a little tiny bit of Spanish. I had some Spanish background, Rod had some Spanish background, and we thought it would be great to teach them some basic vocab. And so the girls and I kind of went on this quest to start teaching ourselves and preparing ourselves. And we were just expectantly waiting for details because that was the promise. Hey, I'll get back to you. I'll give you the details and the dates. And we didn't get those. And so it became like month after month of waiting, well, surely we'll get November's here. We'll learn in December. And it was probably the end of February that we kind of thought the trip must have fallen through. And so we started to try to talk a little bit about, well, what will we do this summer? We had canceled our beach vacation because we anticipated being on a missions trip. And so we started to talk about, let's maybe take the kids to D.C. or something like that for the day because, history is so important. And I will never forget, I was teaching an adult Sunday school class, and our topic of discussion was, when has God closed a door for you? And when had he opened another door in its place? And, up until this point, we didn't tell a single soul that we were thinking of doing a missions trip, not even our parents, because we wanted the details. We wanted this decision to be ours as a family. And then we figured when we knew more, we would tell the people that needed to know. And I will never forget, we were sitting there, and if you've ever taught adults Sunday school class, it's really hard to get people to answer questions. Oh, yeah. And so I'm like, okay, when has God closed a door for you? And, what did that mean? And when did he then open a new door? And of course, I was met with resounding silence. So I shared with my class. I said, okay, I'm going to tell you something you did not know. We were going to take a missions trip. We were taking our family. And I remember it wasn't until I heard myself talk about that I realized how disappointed I was that this was not going to happen for us. And I didn't realize what going meant to me, fulfilling this dream, a childhood dream of sharing the word of the Lord across the world. And I remember, and I think I was sarcastic. I'm sorry, Lord, if I was sarcastic. And I think I'm like, well, ask for the Lord when you want to open that next door, let me know. It was one of those things, And I will never forget that afternoon. Sunday afternoons is schoolwork time. So I announced to the family, I'm going to go downstairs, start my schoolwork, log onto the computer. And we had one incoming email. And it was, greetings in Christ. It's time. How's your Spanish? It's time to go to Guatemala. Mm-hmm. And so that day, And I remember calling Rod down to look at the computer because it was just 3 hours earlier that I said to the Lord, when you're ready to open that door, let me know. And I just believe that, the timing is everything. God's timing is always perfect. And so we had a very quick family meeting in the dining room, and we decided, I'm a list person, we decided to make a list of all the reasons that we should go and all the reasons that we shouldn't go. And so the list of reasons why we should, I think it spanned the whole page. I don't know. We could only come up with 2 items on the list of why we should say no. And one was we didn't have a lot of time to get ready. And the second was we didn't have a lot of money. We needed money to go. And I remember saying to Rod, I just don't feel like these are valid concerns. How can we say to the Lord, yeah, we'll serve you as long as you give us enough, advance notice, and we don't trust that you're going to help us get the money that we need to go. So it was decided that night, our family, we would be packing our bags, and we would have to make some phone calls to our family and tell them that we were going to take their grandkids to a developing country, and I just, I can't even imagine where our lives would be had we let that no side rule our decision. And that's a big thing. It's scary to go into missions, because there's so many things that are unknown. And I always tell people who are thinking about missions, I have never, ever met a person who regretted saying yes to the Lord. I've met a ton of people who said, I wish I would have gone. I wish I would have tried this. We've never met somebody who regretted listening to the call of the Lord. And so I feel so strongly about when people are sitting in church and they get a little bit of a nudge in their heart. That's the Lord speaking to them and calling them into something that could I can't imagine what my life would be like had we said no.
Amen. It reminds that kind of risk taking reminds me of when his name escapes me, but the leader of Free Burma Rangers, when he over in Myanmar, Burma, and he says, I go towards the need, and I just pray, Lord, make me useful, show me how to help, and God uses you. He uses us when we're available, and you had made it so clear to the Lord that you were available, and He put that in front of you, and
in that first year, it was a whirlwind for us, to be able to raise the money to go. And that was the year, every single person on the planet was trying to get a passport. So, literally our passports came with, I don't know, Rod, was 4 days to spare or something like that. So we were really pressed, but it was just, God was so faithful to us, and He was just so reassuring. And and people were skeptical. People would be like, I can't believe you're taking your young children into, a third world country. And, we didn't sign up for the 10-year plan, the 20-year plan now, I guess. I don't know. We were going to go once. We were going to just serve the Lord, and we were going to come home, and life would return to normal. But for us, it didn't. And, and it doesn't have to be that way with everybody. But for us, God just placed this enormous calling on our hearts and on our lives, and everything in our lives changed.
You experience, when you experience things that you see and ways that you see God move, and the joy on a person's face who knows Jesus but doesn't have 2 coins to rub together, seeing that level of joy, that's something you can't forget. And when I look back my faith journey, there's no doubt that it has been mission trips. It has been times whenever I take myself outside of my culture, and where I'm just completely dependent on the Lord and other people, and trying to figure out my way around. And it's that risk of faith that just really, it really causes us to deepen and mature. And those are things I remember. Those are things that you can't unlive that experience. And so, you mentioned the kids being 7 and 11 or 6 and 11, and so and some of the pushback that you got from that, and there's no doubt about it. That most people don't travel. Most people I meet don't travel at all, and those who do travel usually don't go to places like Guatemala. Even though if you go down to Antigua, you see a lot of international travelers. It's usually still few and far between for the Americans that we know. But Rod, I think about, what was it like for you in terms of, you've got two little girls, aren't teenagers yet, and now and you and your wife feel called to take them to a place, a third world country where you've never been, you don't know anything about it, and you're just reading about it in books and just following the lead of God into that, and then you're getting pushback from local people who say you're nuts. You have any idea what goes on down there? You know, how dare you leave the comforts of America? Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, what's that to me? To me, that's a great challenge as a father, but also a great testimony as a father, because everything you just explained to me, like that is the fact that you did that with your kids, with your daughters. Like that's the groundworking of testimony, to see like that you got to make that list with the girls, mm-hmm. and let them be a part of that decision. I mean, that's really a testimony of raising your kids to follow God well and to be willing to take risk, because comfort's always the easy choice. But what was that like for you, Rod, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, I was a little nervous because I had been met with a little pushback. A couple of the ladies, in the car pickup line outside the elementary school, because Lisa worked during the day and I worked at night. I picked the girls up, and so this one mom comes up to me one day and says, "So, what's this story about Laura telling all these kids she's going to Guatemala?" Laura's in like second grade at the time. I said, "Yeah." I said, "We're going to go for it." I said, "We're going to go on a mission trip this summer." And one of the other ladies this lady said, "Oh, that's really neat, and that's about all she had." And the other lady said, "Guatemala, your kids." She looked right at me. She said, "Are you nuts?" And I said, "Well, yeah, that's probably. I probably am." And she said, looked at me and, pardon the language, she said, "Those people have parasites."
Oh my!
And I said, "Yeah, they probably do." But I said, "I guess we'll find out," because I went on and told Lisa, I said, "I don't even really want to talk about this too much, mm-hmm. If it's going to be like that, but we're going to go." I remember telling the girls, Elizabeth was 12, and I thought she'd make out pretty good. But I told her, I said, "You have to stay close." Mm-hmm. The rule, when we hit the airport, now, once we saw how things were going to be, we were able to relax a little bit. I told them, if I reach my arm out and I cannot touch you, you're too far from me. Mm-hmm. You have to be where I can get a hold of you mm-hmm. right away if I need to. And the rest was just faith that things were going to work out. But that was my outlook on it. They're going to be with me, and as long as I can reach out and grab your arm or your shirt or whatever, that you're
yeah.
What we didn't know was our very first assignment was at a school, which was a gated community in essence. So when we got there and we saw like, okay, this is where we are, and when we're here, the girls were with us the entire time, but it was just an absolute beauty. It was seeing these two girls with zero language abilities other than like hello, goodbye, and where's the bathroom, because mom would teach them those things. But to experience love without language, for them to be able to interact with the kids at the school and to be able to show love and friendship. And the girls came home with friends that they continued their relationship with for years beyond. And this is before, Facebook and everything else. When we said our goodbyes that first year, we had no contact with them for an entire year. But, and I know that, Liz, she was at that time a little bit older and a little more guarded. But Laura, I mean, she didn't really know danger at that point. But I will never forget when we got into the village or into the school, all of these little kids just ran up to her and they surrounded her and they were so excited and they were just talking so loud and so fast. And I could tell by her body language that she was like starting to freak out a little bit. We had a translator with us on the team and his name was Arnie. And I said, "Arnie, can you kind of go help her out a little bit?" So he went over and all the kids were like right at him. And so he said, "Laura, these children want to know, will you go play And she said, yes, I will. And they ran off to the playground. And it was just like this beautiful just picture of, like I said, love without language. And they played all week and they worked together. And she wanted to help pour cement. She's 7 years old and she wanted to help on the concrete team because she realized that her help mattered. And so, I mean, I think it was just such a beautiful testimony of, and it was scary. Like, we didn't know what to expect, but we just knew that we were in good hands, in the Lord's hands, and that He would protect us.
And and you know that in any risk you take, anytime you step out in your faith, there are going to be naysayers because most people in their life and in their faith play it safe, and so I always feel like following Jesus. Like you kind of almost want to always have your toes on the edge. Like I always feel like my next step might be off the edge, but He's always guiding and catching. Like take that step. So it's like you don't want to become complacent. You want to keep digging in and keep trusting and taking risk. And so, so your girls have really their lives. I mean, talk about the impact that. That first step of faith has turned into for them, because now they're both grown adults, and so what I mean, obviously our childhood experiences impact the kind of adults we become, and so how has Guatemala changed their lives?
Well, most notably for Elizabeth, the oldest of our daughters. Struggling with the language barrier in those beginning years was very frustrating for her. And when she came home, she really wanted to study Spanish and immerse herself in it because she wanted to be able to communicate. And I do believe that's what shaped her for her career, because now she is a high school Spanish teacher. And I have no idea what could have more of an impact than that, right? That I think God's plan for people is just sometimes so perfect. Mm-hmm. And that's one phase where we can really see that happened.
And I think, like with both of the girls, I know some people said, oh, yeah, they're going to come back and they're going to be totally different kids. And I think that that's true, but they didn't like come home and like purge their closets and throw away every toy that they had. Mm-hmm. But they started to make little decisions that were just different. They wouldn't ask for things, or they would, like, when they were cleaning their closets, things, they would say, well, can I take this to Guatemala? Can we take this? And they would start, instead of, and their clothes, is this still in good enough shape? Can we take this and can we donate? And so they helped us do our fundraisers. They understood that, in order for us to be able to make this trip, we had to be able to do some fundraisers. And so they committed to those, and they wanted to do their part to raise money for the projects that we were doing. And it's just such a beautiful thing to see how they've kind of reprioritized what's important in their lives, and realizing that we're going to take time out of our year every year, and we're going to go and we're going to just set aside the chaos of our lives, and we're going to just serve the Lord. Mm-hmm. And as Liz was getting up through her high school years, they had to do senior projects. Like, I don't know if that's a thing anymore, but she had said, Mom, I have an idea for a senior project. What if we would take Christmas gifts to the kids? Like, what if we would just go down and make sure that they had something for Christmas? So she completely designed that project herself. And she made all of the arrangements, and, we took a small group there, and we took Christmas presents for the kids, and we went like in January. And so that was really beautiful to see that she could have chosen anything to do. And she decided that she thought maybe, one more trip to Guatemala and one more act of service. Something kind of fun with Laura. I don't know, Rod, if you remember this, but, we were going from here to there, and the Powerball was supposed to be really big that night. And he made a little joke like, well, if we're going to win the Powerball, suppose we should buy a ticket, because we don't usually do that. And so he said, it's like, I don't know, Rod, was like $5 million or something like that. And Laura was in the back seat, and so was Liz. And she's like, "Oh, you want to know what I would do if I won $5 million?" And we're like, "Yeah, what would you do?" And she's like, "Well, first of all, we need $4,000 so we can go back to Guatemala." And then she said, at that time, the school did not have internet. And she said, then we would pay and we get internet at the school, at the village. She said, "Can you imagine that, Mom, where all those teachers would have access to things online and they could get textbooks for their kids?" And I mean, that was totally unprompted. We weren't even talking about Guatemala, but she automatically started to think, oh, okay, if I do get this windfall, we're going to give it away. And so that was just a really neat, she was maybe 8 or 9 at the time, and that was how she began to see things a little differently. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, those are wonderful stories. Yeah. You're really just impacting the way they view life. Mm-hmm. And because most kids are kind of born with this take kind of grabbing, like, because like if you I always say this. I remember where I first heard this. I might have heard this from my dad, or maybe it was just in a sermon somewhere. But how when a baby's born, we're born grabbing and reaching. Our hands are just going like this the whole time. But then when we pass away, we release. Your hands fall open and you release, because everything in this world has to stay back. So like we're born with this build and get and collect, and like as a young girl, like, I want all the clothes, I want all the shoes. And so for you to expose them at such a young age to those with less, but not just from a poverty standpoint, but from a point of loving these people. And so those relationships and them being able to just roll that into how they approach the decisions in their life. And then you see, I love that you're like explaining how you see like these little things in choices that they make. They're like, it's like, well, do I need this, or can I give it away? Or mm-hmm. do I need this new widget, or can I save my money and use it for something else? Like, it just creates this kind of less is more quality of life that's beautiful, that I think is healthy for us all to practice, and then it impacts their life. So, so thanks for sharing all those great stories about the kids. So walk us through kind of that journey, how you went from taking your kids in 2007 and going through another agency, and then those years of working in Guatemala eventually led to, in 2014, going out on your own. So this is a long span. You got 7 years there. You got a lot of trips there. And so over that process, over that period of time, there's a process where you're falling in love with Guatemala. You're falling in love with the people down there. And so what was it kind of like at the beginning in that, as you got going, when you've realized, because you went, like you said, you kind of went thinking, oh, this will be a one and done. And then the relationships started growing, and you started to fall in love with these people and really feel this constant tug to go and be with them. And and it's just so evident in you guys that this is a real deep love and a genuine broken heart for the people down there. And you have real deep quality relationships with these people. And so what was kind of that process for you when you realized, like, this is more than that?
Well, we knew that we worked hard that first week we were there, but we just had that feeling there's so much more to do. Yeah. And I remember after we went a couple of years, my mom said to me, I know you're really busy. You and Lisa both work. Your girls are busy. Do you need to take a summer off? And I said to her, well, if you can find someone who will go do this for me that I can trust will do it, then I'll take a year off. And that time just never came. There was always so much more to do. And I think Lisa felt the same way. And no matter how many people you help, there's so many more that need help. And that first year, second year, first 2 years we were in a village called Santiago Zamora. The third year we split our time. In the morning we worked in that village, and then that was the first year we had gone to Santa Maria de Jesus, which was a new village for the organization we were traveling with at the time. And we really thought we knew what poverty was. We had been here, a couple years now. We've seen the need, but that first year when he took us up the mountain to Santa Maria de Jesus, we really saw what poverty was. They were so much poorer than the villages we'd been working in for a couple of years. I remember speaking with another guy he's a school teacher from Texas who goes down and he works in the school that we were at those first couple of years. His name was Michael Graham. He does it. I don't know. He still might do it, but he's probably retired now. I ran into him, though. We stopped out and visited the school on our day off that one time because we were working in Santa Maria de Jesus. And he said, "What are you doing? I haven't seen you this year. You come every year." I said, "We're up the mountain." We went to Santa Maria de Jesus, and he looks at me. He said, "Boy, I am so glad you went up there." He said, "Nobody goes up there." He said, "They just got water up there a couple of years ago."
Wow.
It was the people down there that really knew that they needed more help.
When we had learned that we would be starting our work in a new village, as Rod said, like when they said the need is so much greater, I couldn't even wrap my head around that, because I thought we had a pretty good idea of what poverty in Central America could look like. And when we got there, it was heartbreaking. It was eye-opening. And that's when I think especially we made that decision as a family that we wanted to be there and help the people for a very long time. It was a place where the people would tell us that they felt forgotten by the Lord. They felt, because they were so far removed from other places, there weren't a lot of people who would leave the village. Now, the transportation situation is a lot better. People come and go. But a lot of the people in our very first year, they had spent their entire lives never leaving. And they would say that the Lord forgot them. And I remember thinking to myself, how would that feel? How would I feel personally if I felt God had forgotten me? And how we had the ability to remind them that God had not forgotten them at all. And the reminder would be this ragtag group of Americans that just kept showing up on their door and just continuing to show love and show up and keep a promise to return. That very first year, they never thought they would see us again. We did not know that at the time, but we know that now because we've had these beautiful conversations. And we say to them, what did you think when we showed up for the very first time? And they said, well, we thought you were strange because why would you come here?
Yeah.
And when you said you'd be back, they laughed about that. They're like, why would you ever want to come back to this? They would say, we want to spend our whole lives trying to get out of here. Why would you intentionally come back? And I think it's those things that just really just struck my heart as this commitment that I am here with you through the hard times, through the great times, through the celebrations, and through the mornings. I'm not going away because the Lord isn't going away and you are not forgotten. And if I can be that physical reminder to people that God is still working, then I'm going to show up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great testimony. I've heard pieces of what you just said from various missionaries over the years. I once knew a missionary who was traveling from Minnesota to Eastern Europe, and he had the same kind of conversations as you did. He said honestly, the inroads are easy because we simply have a testimony just when they find out that we're from America, because he said everybody over there, they want to come to America, and so I immediately have their attention whenever I tell them I left America because I love you, because you matter, and because in their minds, America's kind of that's the win. That's where they want to get to. And it's hard for us to wrap our minds around it because we've lived here all our life. But but that's what they would say. This is, I automatically, I have a testimony just because I left America to come and serve you. And so, and even when I was in South Dakota on the Native American reservation, there was a guy who had moved there to Pine Ridge. Was the poorest. It was it's always in like the top 3 poorest counties in the United States, and there was a guy who had moved there from a big city in Florida to be a missionary, and he said the same thing. He's like, man, he said, the fact that I'm here means that God is real and that God calls people, because I meet people here all the time and say, why would you move here from Florida? Mm-hmm. And so that's something that God does. He shakes us up and he sends us to places that to the rest of the world it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. But that's what's beautiful about it in God's upside down kingdom, is he calls us to take those risks and to show love to the least of these. And so that's what you're doing. It's beautiful. And along this way, your faith is growing while you're serving other people. So it's like there's this give and take relationship of I'm there to serve, but I feel like I'm being served because this relationship is changing me. And Rod, you mentioned your mom. Like your mom was pretty proud of you in your steps of the way that you changed, wasn't she?
I think so. The mission meant a lot to her.
Yeah.
Yes. Unfortunately, she passed away before we formed Moving Mountains. But that she was probably our biggest mission supporter that we ever had.
Yeah. And that was something that it kind of just something that really, really neat for her to see you kind of grow into, through your life. And
yes.
at least you kind of have similar stories with your father, right?
Yeah. My mom, she is our greatest mission supporter, so I wouldn't go up against that anytime. Battle of the moms, yeah.
Here we go.
But, she's a great mom. And so when I said, I'm taking the girls and we're going to a third world country, of course she was concerned. My dad, he was like, I am so proud of you. And he would tell my mom, they need to do this. Like, I had a chance to go on a mission trip in 1972, and I said no, and I regret it ever since. He was that voice. And he would be the one I'm so proud of you, and tell me what you did. And he was just such an incredible supporter of us, just prayer support, and of course, helping us financially, and just that emotional stability of it is right. It is okay to be nervous. It is okay, but it's not okay to say no to the Lord. And so he was just always that person. He was my hero. And he did get a chance a little bit to see of our beginnings of Moving Mountains. But I often think, I just wish that he could see what we were doing right now, because he would just be incredibly proud of us.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
So, we worked in Santa Maria de Jesus for a couple years with our partner organization, and at that time, we were very, very satisfied with our work there. We loved it because they kind of planned the projects and everything, and we just showed up. We had paid our money, and we worked. We got to serve all week, and things were all planned out, and things were going pretty well for a few years. As time progressed, our leader had told us that things were getting kind of hard for him. He'd been doing this for quite a few years, and he wasn't positive that he was going to return the following year. And we said, we need to know, because we fundraise for our whole family to go here. It's a big chunk of money every year we have to set aside and raise. So we need some advance, what's going to happen. And he wasn't always real prompt with notifying us, but it was okay. We always just used to fundraise and thinking there'd be a trip, and it happened. But also getting to know these people we had some ideas of our own start to develop, and we also wanted to build a long-term relationship with them. We didn't want to, couldn't even imagine not going back. If you can understand that. We were at that point where we were going to try to be in this for the long haul. I don't know what's going to happen if we don't go. So we began to talk about, well, if there isn't a mission trip, maybe we'll have to try and figure out how to do one. And then we developed a few ideas of our own about some work projects, and we wanted to run them by the other group. Hey, could we maybe try this? Some of the people were asking, and we were met with a resounding no. And that's basically how Moving Mountains got started. We wanted to develop a long-term relationship and try some projects of our own ideas. And these aren't projects that we just dreamt up, okay? All the projects that we have done were requested by the village. We don't know what they need. We may think we know what they need, but they know what they need. And I think that's
starting out on the right foot, because there are many times mission agencies will just come flying in at night and build something and disappear. I mean, my wife and I traveled to Haiti back in 2015, and we went past this beautiful, like 2-story, colorful houses, out in the middle of this open field, and there was nobody living there. There was nothing going on there, and we asked our tour guide or our host. He said, "Why? Those are so nice. Why isn't anybody living there?" And they said, "Well, some mission agency just decided we needed those, so they just came in and they popped them up." And they said, "Haitians don't live in 2-story buildings. Mm-hmm. They don't want anything to do with that." And so they put all this effort and all this work into something, but they never took the time to ask the people that they were coming to supposedly serve what they actually need. And so that sounds to me like a great. You're starting off on such a positive foot, because in the right place. We want to build relationships because we want to be about the people, and I don't want to bring you something that you're not actually interested in. That's a huge state of mind on day one.
Incidentally, one thing that I do really feel it's important to share, we weren't in the meeting, but when the first mission group was met with the village leaders to talk about the projects that he would do if he brought a group up there, he gave them a list, and at that time it was high-efficiency wood stoves in their kitchens, so they'd gather less firewood, and they had vented the smoke through a pipe up through the roof so that they wouldn't be breathing in all the smoke from the open fire, because that's what some of them still have open fires, most of them have stoves of some sort now. They do concrete floors in homes that have dirt floors. Help me out here, Lisa.
Yeah, a medical clinic.
A medical clinic was one, and
Vacation Bible School.
Mm-hmm. And they said, okay. And they said, can we talk for a bit? And they were probably speaking in Kachakal so that no one else could understand them, which is the native Mayan dialect. And the village leaders, after they spoke for a while, they came back and said, okay, we choose Bible school. They didn't understand that all these projects would be brought. They thought they had to pick one.
Yeah.
So instead of a floor in their house, instead of a new stove or something, they were willing to choose Bible school. They wanted their children to hear the word of the Lord. That's what was most important to them. And I always felt that was an incredible testimony of those people, because they were giving up a lot just so that their kids could hear the word of God.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, when we did decide that we wanted this long-term commitment, and we wanted to be totally respectful of the changing needs in the village, that's why we created Moving Mountains, so that we could make a long-term commitment with the promise that, God willing, we will be back. And let's come to the table and let's sit down and let's see, what are some things that we can do to serve you and to serve your people. And so that was the heart of Moving Mountains mission.
That's the foundation.
Yep.
That's where it's all coming.
Yeah. So our very first year, we were really nervous because, you know, the voice of the enemy is loud. You know, you're not able, you're not qualified, you know nothing about this. Those are all correct statements. You know, we knew nothing about it. So we had this little unwritten, we had this little meeting on our deck, and we're like, okay, what can we do? You know, are there things that we were currently doing that are working? So, you know, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. If there's something that, you know, we had been doing that seemed to be successful, you know, we don't want to change everything. So we were kind of talking about those things, and we kind of had this little decision in our group that we're going to keep it small. We're only going to take a handful of people that, in my words, you know, that can keep themselves alive for a week, you know, because we had no confidence in our ability to lead a mission team. And so we just decided, we kind of did a little head count, and there were people that we had been working with for years. And so like that was our like big family reunion in Guatemala. So we really felt like we needed to reach out privately and say, listen, you know, we're not coming next summer, we're going to go, but we're not going to go at the same time. And what happened was a lot of people that we had become very close to, they were also wanting the same things that we were wanting. They wanted a long-term commitment with the village. They wanted to explore new work project opportunities. And so they would say, well, we want to come with you. And pretty soon, you know, I was having this like battle with the Lord. Like, you know, I said I would do this, but you have to keep the number small. You know, that was my deal. It kind of sounds ridiculous now, but it's entertaining. I'm sure I give the Lord a lot of giggles along the way. But I remember at one point, we had taken on our 30th volunteer. And I remember wide awake at night saying to the Lord, I said I would do this, and 30 is no longer a small number. You know, what are you doing? But in his defense, like that year, we had 39 people our very first year. And up until the pandemic, that was truly the smallest group we had ever taken. So
There you go.
he got the Lord for the win, as always. But, you know, that first year, we were nervous, and we just prayed like crazy. And we just knew that even if we hit some bumps and snags along the way, that God would help us find our way through. And it was an incredible week with an incredible group of people. And I remember, like, at the close, I thought it'll never be this good again. Like, we'll never get this combination of people. And then, like, the next year, God called even more. And our team kept growing and growing. And I think every year I'd say, oh, this is probably the best year we'll ever have, you know. But every year, God just shows up, and he just recruits this team that is just amazing. So we've just been blessed by the people that have come to serve with us, about the lessons that he's taught us, and just the skills that he has given to us that we had no idea that we had. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
That's kind of been my experience with following the Lord. Is it's like he gives us a little bit more than we can handle, but he's still kind of, he's not just throwing us in the deep end necessarily, as much as he's like, okay, we're gonna walk into the deep end, but I'm going to make you go a little farther than you feel like you're ready for, because I'm with you along the way, and we're going to get there. And so you have so you've taken those steps, you've built this. This is 2014, and then 2014 leads all the way to where we're at today. And some of those people they continue to come back.
Yes.
And they just, so your love for the people in Guatemala has been infectious in many, many lives, right? Mm. And you're seeing that ripple effect in their lives.
But it's also the love among our team. You know, it is just astounding to me, and I don't know that people understand it until they're there, but like you're brought together for a common good and a common purpose and a common goal, and you're coming all together just to serve the Lord, and you're with these people in a day or two, and you feel like you've known them your whole life. Mm-hmm. And the relationships among our team members, as well as with the people in the village, these relationships, they're our family. You know, we bring in people from all over the United States, and they are second family to us. And it truly is a grand, beautiful family reunion in Guatemala.
Mm-hmm. You really do. Any trip like that I've been on, I can absolutely relate to that. It's you gel I don't think I've been on a group ever with 40 plus people. It's usually more. It's usually, I guess I'm probably on the smaller of the spectrum of that. Maybe 20 or less. Some with as small as less than 10. Some a handful. And but you gel in those moments, and a big part of that, you're doing everything together, and you're experiencing something so brand new to most of the people that are on the trip. And so when you're out of the element, you lean on each other, and so you have that experience together that that nobody can ever take that away, and nobody that every individual trip kind of takes on its own its own identity, and so you remember pieces from all of that. It's and God builds those teams, doesn't He? Like you don't like the right person is there for the right project or for the right relationship, the right hurdle that comes along the way. It always seems like on purpose, but you can't ever recreate that same trip. It's kind of like I always think it's kind of like an airplane. Like you can fly. Like I could fly in an airplane from Pittsburgh to Miami 100 different times, and never once is that group of people going to be exactly the same. I mean, we're making the same trip, but it's just always changing. And so you become a unit because you're serving together and loving together and all that. And so,
and it's the shared experience.
Yeah.
It's the miracle that you experience with your little crew. And no matter what you do, you're never going to find the right words to be able to explain that to somebody who was not there at that moment in that time. And those bond your team, and just that community of workers together, that you're like, did we just see what we saw? Did that just really happen? And those kinds of experiences, no matter what you do, it just changes your life.
When it comes to things like, I guess, what would you call reentry, or like a decompressing? Like there are, I've had it suggested to me, like when you're talking to someone who hasn't been there, you have to gauge who you're talking to, because some people are like, if they ask you how your trip was, they really just want you to say good and go about your life. They don't want to know. And some people want the Cliff Notes. And then you have some people in your life that are like going to want to sit down in your living room or over a cup of coffee and say, I want to know the heart behind what you did. I want to know all about that. So you really have to kind of gauge that, don't you, on that re-entry back into your everyday life.
And that's something we've just learned along the way.
Yeah.
And you've explained it perfectly. Our very first year back, like Rod and I don't know how many hundreds of pictures I took, lots. And we wanted to tell everybody everything.
Yeah.
Not everybody wants to hear everything. And so, we did get invitations to speak, and that was just so therapeutic for us, to have a church that would invite us to come, and then we could share some stories and share some photos, and I created some videos and that sort of thing, and just to be able to try to give people even just a taste of what we experienced, or just a glimpse of what we saw. That was healing for us. Coming back is hard, because you're leaving behind your family and your emotions, and that you will never ever be that same person again as you were during that week. And that's an okay thing, but it took a lot of learning and practice on our parts to get that.
Well, and it's kind of like anything that you experience or fall in love with, like a new hobby, a new passion, a new love. You want to tell everybody about it, and you want them to experience it because you think it's so great, right? And so it's so hard to translate that to people. So you just want to grab your friends and your family, throw them on a plane, and say, let's go do some Guatemala mission work together. You need this. You need this in your life. And so, and from a faith standpoint, there's something about disconnecting that really causes you to need to dig in and get a new perspective. What are so you guys do? You do construction projects. You do the roofs, the water tanks, the floors. You've done a little bit with the heaters, the stoves, and then the Bible school. because of COVID, you just started doing the meals. So what are some? Are there any stories? What are your favorite stories from your work in doing? And I know each of those brings on different things.
Well, I think sometimes it's the unexpected job assignments that have the most impact. And the 1 year before we got into Guatemala, a tropical storm, Agatha, had wreaked havoc across Central America. And we knew that there were mudslides in Guatemala. We knew that Santa Maria suffered a mudslide. We knew that people had lost their lives, but we didn't know where. We didn't know anything about it. It was kind of like the thing nobody talked about. We were itchy for information, but we didn't have any information at that time. And then Rod got asked to be a part of the cleanup crew. So I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about that.
And my concrete team that year finished up their last floor on Friday morning. We only had one to do. We got it done early. We got there early, and it was small. We got it done quickly. And they told me afterwards, we're going to take you out to this house. These people, they lost their house in the storm. And you want you to try to level some ground for this family so that they can build a new house. And it was one of those things where I just said, okay, we'll take a look at it and see what we can do. You know, I had concrete teams, 4 or 5 people at that time. I had a good Guatemalan contractor and his son, and I believe he had maybe his wife and daughter with him on the last day, because sometimes he brought them up to the village too. And we went out to this site, and I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever seen a mudslide. I mean, I never really saw one before. What's a mudslide? You know, you hear about them. Do you ever really pay attention? Well, let me tell you what. When you stand on the side of a mountain on this little bench and you can look straight up where it came down from, and the only thing in front of you that's left of this house is a tangled mess of tin and corn stalks and wire and maybe a few concrete blocks, you know, sticking out of the dirt. And you walk over to the edge of this little bench and you look down over and you see the rest of their house laying down there in a pile. And it's like, what happened here? And, you know, they walked us up to this place and like, okay, we're here. And I looked around the corner. I'm like, what are we going to do? And the family standing there looking, and we learned that the government promised help, to send somebody to help them, and they never did. So they were waiting for a month, pretty much. Didn't want to start trying to clean anything up because they were afraid if they did, the government wouldn't help them. Yeah. So, you know, the Lord sent us there, and we waited a while, made a couple phone calls on my track phone because I said, we got to have some more people up here. And the contractor told me that if we had pincharos, and I said, what's a pincharo? And he drew me a picture in the dirt. It was a pick instead of a shovel. We could use some of those. So we actually recruited some more people, and they went and bought some picks and came out, and we spent the entire day, you know, trying to straighten up things for them. But when we started, all we could do was make piles. So we started making piles of blocks over here and a pile of wood over on the other side. This was parts of their house. We'd pull out the tin and stack it over here, and the corn stalks we would stack over here. And we just started making piles to clean it up, and we started digging through it with our shovels and later on with the picks. And one of the first things as we started to level the ground out, I dug up a spoon, and I picked it up. And I'm like, hey, look what I found. And the lady of the house came running over and hugged me and grabbed her spoon in the dirt for a month. And we dug up shoes, hooded sweatshirts, more silverware, plates, cups, everything out of the dirt. I mean, yeah, we broke a couple hitting them with a pick. I felt awful if I put a pick right through their coffee cup. Yeah. And I did. I felt absolutely terrible. But they didn't care about that. But they gathered up everything and took it over to wash it. Because that was somebody that the first person that I ever met, I think, that lost everything they had. Mm-hmm. And even the contractor, when we talked about it, I talked with the son, Willie, and he said, he just shook his head, you know, and his sister was crying, and he said, all their food, all their clothes, their house. He just looks at me and he said, gone. Toto, everything. Toto's everything it's been gone. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the most, remarkable things that I had ever seen. And it was horrific, but, at the end of the day, when we finished that area, it was like 10 meters by 20 meters, and it looked actually pretty good, when we were done for them to build their new house. The only thing, we prayed a lot with the family. We got a lot of sincere thank yous, but I still to this day wonder, whatever happens if another mudslide comes down that hill. They rebuilt a nice house. There's a nicer house.
You've been there? You've visited since?
Yeah, we've been back. It's still there, but I just look up that hill behind the house,
Oh, yeah. That'd be a scary place to lay your head at night.
Well, those people told us that usually at night when it rained, someone would stay awake to watch in case that happened, so they could wake everybody else up so they could get out. And could you imagine living like that every time it rained? And rainy season hits, it rains, 3-4 months sometimes. I just think it would be very hard. Very hard. Harder than I can probably imagine.
And that's the human element behind all that we're doing. We're not just building floors, right? You're not just digging up dirt. Like you're loving people. And there's real people living there, experiencing life, going through hurt. And you were the angel. You were one of the angels that God sent in there that day to help them along, help them get back on their feet. And so you got to be an ambassador for Christ in that moment.
I still
praying
remember
for them.
looking at that lady, and I'm thinking, she's looking at me, and I have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, somebody tell me what to do.
Oh.
I said to the contractor, how do we do this? So we waited a while, and finally he just said, okay, we'll start making piles.
Yeah.
And that's what we did.
You go towards the hurt and say, Lord, show me how to help. And you guys have also seen some miracles, right? What are some of the most miraculous things that you've seen that you're able to share?
I remember there was a little girl who was carried into our medical clinic. Her name is Jessica, and she was extremely sick. She hadn't eaten, according to her parents, for weeks. She was extremely dehydrated. And when our doctors took a look at her, they were like, pretty much, she needs to go to the hospital. And the mom was like, well, I don't know. I really need to talk to her dad. And they said, well, I'm guessing like her dehydration was to the point, like even if they had an IV, they probably couldn't have been able to put that in. And they were saying we had funds set aside so that the family wouldn't have incurred medical costs. We could have paid for that visit to the doctor and everything. And the mom was just insistent that no decision could be made until she talked to dad at home. And so they did get the mom to agree to let her in with the doctors in the clinic. And they wrapped her up and they had her on an exam table just to try to keep her there. The mom lived miles away. So literally she carried this child for miles just to see the American doctors. So she was gone for a period of time, and then she ran back. And when she came back in, she said that no, dad had said no. The last child that they took to the hospital died. Hospitals are places of death. The answer is no. And I remember our doctors were just devastated. They knew she needed immediate medical attention beyond what they could do. So they did ask the mom if they could just take care of her throughout the day. They said, go back home. We'll try to tend to her. And the little girl was terrified. Of course, she's surrounded by Americans speaking a different language. We did have some translators on the team that were able to communicate with her. They were able to, we had little packets of the Gatorade in the powder form, so they were able to mix up a little bit of Gatorade for her, and somebody pulled like a straw from a juice box, and they got her to drink a tiny bit, and that stayed down. And they were able to get some crackers, and they got her to eat a few crackers. But at the end of the day, the mom came back, and she's just like, okay, I need to take her home. And the doctors pleaded with her, please let us get her to the emergency room. The answer was no. And I remember that we had some women from a church. They donate beautiful handmade quilts to us every year when we go. And so they said, this little girl's most likely going to die. Do you think it's okay to send this quilt? And of course, our partners, those ladies would be just so grateful that they had something to contribute, in that situation. I know I'm not using complete sentences now, but I said they would be honored for their quilt to offer love and comfort. And so the mom, they gave the mom some, is it amoxicillin, I
believe
think?
it was
I think it was
it was the
amoxicillin.
antibiotic.
They said, she was able to eat a little bit, she's able to drink a little bit, try to give her a little more medicine. And so this was day one of mission. And when we got back to the hotel that night, usually Monday night, the hotel is just booming. The adrenaline from your first day of work, and people were excited. There was such grief in our hotel. There was so much prayer, but we were crying. We were praying that this mom would change her mind. That was our prayer. Please let this mom change her mind. And so I'll never forget, even the ride up the next morning to the village was silent. Like nobody was talking because they knew that most likely Jessica had died through the night. And so the doctors went into the medical clinic, and this little girl comes bouncing through the front gates. It was Jessica. She's totally healed. And skipping and smiling, and she didn't even look like the same child. Turns out, the mom got really excited that the medicine worked, so they ended up
Mm-hmm.
giving the child the entire bottle of amoxicillin. That is not recommended by anybody. But that's also a testimony of like the lack of education.
Yeah.
You know, that is such a huge part of the obstacles that we face, you know, is just being able to communicate effectively, and you know, medical education is important. But I will never forget, you know, and it's a second, third-hand story from our doctors, but they were just like, this mom's like, you saved her life, you saved her life. And our doctor said, we did not. The Lord has a plan for Jessica. And when she grows up, she needs to tell others that the God had saved her life because he has a really great plan for her. And so to this day, we still see her. And, you know, her life is a testimony. And you know, and selfishly, like, I don't know that I prayed for her healing. Like, I'd like to think I did, but I mean, we were so focused on like the only way that Jessica would live is if, you know, we got urgent medical condition, forgetting the greatest physician needs no emergency room. But her story and her life story is just a testimony on how God meets you there. And not every Jessica story has had a happy ending. You know, we've lost kids, you know, we've had lots of death in the village, but what a beautiful story that little girl's life was for every single one of us to just remember that God is there and he is working and he has not forgotten.
Amen. Yeah. God even protected her from an amoxicillin overdose.
Yes.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
could be dangerous.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
prayers doubly worked.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. That goes back to the original reason for even starting this, building relationships with people. It's always about the people. I mean, I used to have a sign on the wall in my office that says "People are the mission," because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. At the end of the day, it's the relationships that matter. In missions and in life, it always has to come back to the people. And so, so you guys, as much as any missionaries that I've ever met, are brilliant at that in putting your hearts out there, and that's risky too, because you have that risk of hurt. Because we have the awesome miracles that you guys get to see, but when you put yourself out there, you experience pain, because you mentioned having some people you've built relationships that have lost their life. And what's that like 1,000 miles away? Something is a place you don't want to go, probably.
It's horrible. That's not even the right word.
Yeah.
It is grief beyond
Yeah.
description. And we do expect that, our elders, their passing is sad for us, but we all expect that. But it's the young losses of life that even here, we question the Lord. Why did that happen? But when you are so far away from the people that you love and you just want to be there for them in that moment, to do nothing other than cry with them and hold them and love them and sit with them and walk with them, whatever it might look like, that distance is compounded. And it takes us to places where we also question the Lord, like, why this person? He was a good boy. Lord, he loved you. Why was his life cut short? And those are no different than any of the questions that we experience loss here. But during those times of grief, we want to draw in and support each other. And I am totally convinced that grief itself is overwhelming, but when you pair grief with poverty, it's almost insurmountable. And so those are the times when I feel that we need to be there and support one another. I was in Guatemala when my dad passed away. And so that, for me, that was one of the most difficult times of my life, because I was supposed to be here by his bedside, but I wasn't. I was 2,449 miles away. But, they were there to support me and help get me on the plane and send me back home. And I'm all grateful for that as well.
So the relationship is very reciprocal.
Yeah.
And so from a faith or religion standpoint, you guys have connected with wonderful people down there who are also believers and work throughout the community. And so you have trips every July. You go on these trips and you go down there and you stay in Antigua at a beautiful Candelaria hotel, and then you ride up the mountain, up the volcano. So we live. This is volcano country, and so I had the privilege of going with you guys in February of 2020. Which was interesting because
Before the world shut down.
we made it. It was just in time,
Yes.
and so it was like a weekend fast trip. 4 days,
Yep.
and with some other leaders from the church. And I remember when we went on that trip, COVID was happening around the world, and they were monitoring it. And I remember I went to Walmart and I got a 3M NIOSH mask, and I put it in my backpack, and I thought, just in case they announce that COVID is in one of the airports that we're going to, I want to have this to pull out of my backpack. But I know but I'm not going to pull it out unless I really need to, because everybody's going to laugh at me, because who wears a mask, right? And this is February, and it's like, within a month of us getting back, the world shuts down and everything changes. And so we got to go on that trip just in time. But on that trip, I'm so grateful that I got to go on that trip, because it made the next 2 years of figuring out and dialoguing with you guys about going on trips, and the trip getting smaller, and can we go? Are we able to go? Is it too risky to go because of getting out? And so I got to see, while I was there, I got to see it with my own eyes and see, like, we talk about the relationships. Like, I got to see you guys interacting with people that you know really well and people that you love. And we were walking through the streets of Santa Maria de Jesus, and some guy comes swooping around in a car and slams on the brakes and rolls the window down. And Rod, you just like walked over to him and start talking to him in Spanish, and oh yeah, how you doing? You remember that?
Yeah. My friend Luis.
Luis. I was like, I looked at everybody. I think I looked at Ron and Karen, and I'm like, he's a local. This is unbelievable. I mean, so don't ever, even your Spanish is a lot better than you give it credit for, Rod. You have that. You can communicate well with the people down there, and you just have. It was beautiful to see you guys interact with them down there, and so COVID hit, and that kind of put everything on the back burner, put a lot of things on the side. But and I don't really want to go deep into the COVID thing or anything, but what I want to talk about, if you're willing to talk about, is what God used COVID to birth in your hearts, to that because of those awesome relationships that you had built over the years, you were already prepared to be a part of. I remember where this started. It was okay. So let me just kind of give it back. So we talked about. I mentioned at the beginning about the meals that you do at Christmas, and you can talk. You can share a bunch about that if you want to. But kind of the way I understood it is, March and spring of 2020 started happening in the U.S. Shut down. We didn't have church in person we did 10 weeks without church in person, and. So everybody's afraid of sickness and famine, and so we start to kind of you just naturally start to pull back and pull everything in and make sure that you're okay. And by summer, it seemed that even though a lot of those things are happening, it seemed like in the U.S. at least the shelves were a little bit more healthy. If you will, right? And so we started to realize more like, okay, we can shift our focus a little bit more to generosity and to giving, and as the Lord has provided for that, and that, not that we shouldn't give anyway, right? Through it all, just always default to generosity. But in July, you led us at the church. You led us in what we called a white flag offering, and that was our first offering specifically for providing food to people in Guatemala. So do you mind sharing us a little bit about that, and then how that birthed into a feeding program that you didn't have before?
Yeah. I was one of those people during the early pandemic that I was convinced that the world was going to be okay in a short period of time. Mm-hmm. Our theme for our mission in 2020 was called Expect a Miracle, and I expected that. I called on the Lord and said, for many years I would say I can't imagine not spending a summer in Guatemala. And so I was counting on a miracle.
Now you chose that theme prior?
Mm-hmm.
Before COVID was a thing. You knew that was going to be your theme.
Yep, expect a miracle.
Wow.
Because when we show up and we serve the Lord, He will show up too. Mm-hmm. And so I had our Bible study curriculum written, everything ready to go, and I expected wholeheartedly that come July 2020, we would be on a plane. That was not the plan. And so I had a really hard time emotionally, spiritually, physically, because they have become part of my plan every summer. And I remember I had no purpose for my summer. I thought, well, I don't even know what to do. And then we began to communicate with our partners, and we began to understand that this food situation in Guatemala was horrendous. Rod, do you want to talk a little bit about their restrictions and things like that?
Yes. We thought there was a bad shutdown in the United States, but you have to put it in like a third world or developing country perspective here when you think about Guatemala. Most of these people don't have a refrigerator in their house. Therefore, for the evening meal, you're probably going to get that food today. Yeah. And all of a sudden, there's a government shutdown, okay? And they decide to shut down public transportation. There'll be no buses into Antigua or Guatemala City or any of the places they're not allowed to do that anymore. Curfews are going to start taking effect from 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. every day. Stay in your house. because the public transportation shut down, and a lot of people can't go to work, even though from after 4 a.m. they're allowed out of their house, but you better be working or something like that. You know what I mean? There were a lot of restrictions, which meant all these people pretty much lost their ability to work. Thus, they lost their ability to have money or food. I think it was just something that happened because of the government shutdown. You know, they really didn't think it through, but it's the way it happened there.
Yeah.
You know, they said that the crops were rotting in the fields because the workers weren't allowed out to work in the fields. You know, I mean, it was just bad.
So then where does the food come from? Is it domestic or international? If
the crops were rotting in the field, a lot of this was already processed, though.
Yeah.
And they do have some crops. They do export a lot of vegetables from Guatemala because they can grow vegetables 12 months out of the year. So a lot of that were the exports that didn't go. But they had no food. So the government instructed people to hang a white flag outside their house where there was a need for food. And they would try to, when food became available, they would send someone around to deliver food. And there were people, lots of people, that hung white flags. By the time the truck ever made it to Santa Maria de Jesus, it was about empty. From stopping at all the white flags along the way, hardly any families got anything.
So we had a team of, I don't know how many people were signed up in 2020 that had already committed their finances to go. So what do you do with that? You know, people have paid their money. Then a lot of that money was earmarked for work projects that now were not going to happen. So we invited our team to meet together on Zoom, and we just had a conversation about what can we do. And I sat there at that meeting, and almost every single person said, whatever money I raised, send money, let them, get food. They were willing to set aside that money that they had planned to use to get to Guatemala, and they just donated that forward. We partnered with local churches, One Life being the biggest supporter of that project, and we had reached out to our partners, and they had said, how desperate the situation was, and we said, if we get you money, is there any way that you can get food to people? And they said yes, that they felt that they could get out in between the curfew hours, and they could, through days' time, that they could begin to shop for food, and they could make sure that people who were starving got food deliveries. And we thought we could maybe do that once or twice. We ended up being able to send food for every 2 weeks from July up through almost December. And it was only because of the outpouring of love of people who said, you know what, that money that I sent for my trip, I would much rather that you see that people get that. And I think in my head, I guess I always just thought, like, as a leader of moving mountains, like, I need to be there. I do need to be there just because I love to be there for my friends. But we had so many messages from the village just reassuring me personally. Marvin, our friend Marvin, said, Lisa, don't worry. We know what to do. We know what to do because we've been watching you for a really long time. And we know how you love us and you love the way Jesus loves. We got this. We know how you would want us to do. And for me, empowering people who were helpless to now help one another. The stories of their love for one another at one food delivery, they ended up with extra food, so they found this little remote pocket next to the village of people that were forgotten. And they were so excited to tell us, look, we found these people, we had extra food, and we took it to them. That's what we've been working for since 2014, showing people what it looks like to love Jesus and love one another. And it was a beautiful thing. I mean, I still wanted to get on an airplane and get there.
Yeah.
I wanted to be there to help. I wanted to be there just to let them know that they were not alone, but they were so unbelievably hardworking, and they worked day in, day out countless hours between curfew hours, shopping, meeting together, masking up, packaging food, getting it to people because they know that that's what God would want them to do. So that was a pretty awesome project to be part of.
Yeah, that's God was working in the background from the very beginning. He knew this was going to happen, and he was preparing you guys and preparing them down there. He was preparing our church and the many other churches that you go and you share and raise support from, and that's just an awesome example of being the hands and feet of Jesus to the least of these.
Well, and a story, I don't think I've shared this with a whole lot of people. You might have heard this story, Pastor Guy, but it was July 2019. It was Friday of our mission week. It was a beautiful sunny day, and my entire team was out. We were delivering food because that's our wrap-up project before we leave. One more act of love, see that people have food before we go. And I remember, and I was chit-chatting with another woman on our team, and everything in the world felt perfect. I hadn't started to cry yet because I was leaving Guatemala. The tears don't start until 2 p.m. So this was pre Lisa's sobbing. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, this is what you need to do. And I was so confused because I thought, what, you want me to walk around and deliver food? And I remember I was just so unsettled, and I would just kept hearing this in my head, Lisa, this is what you need to do. And I don't know if it was a warning of what was to come. But when I look back, I really feel that God was allowing me to say, this is where it's going to have to happen. Because in a year's time, these people are going to be desperate for food. And you need to put aside your agenda of bunk beds and VBS and roofing and floors, because there's going to come a time when you need to meet people in their most basic of needs. And I remember I didn't understand that at the time. And it may or may not have been the voice of the Lord, but I was confused. Like, what do you mean I'm supposed to deliver food? Yeah, we are doing that, Lord. We're doing that. It was totally confusing. But in looking back, I kind of wonder if God was preparing my heart for the year that would come when I wouldn't be there, but I could still see that people got the food that they needed to survive.
Mm-hmm. It's a legacy that you're building, is you're training them up to care for each other. It's like you've talked about in the past about kind of impacting the culture by showing generosity and showing giving, because when you live in a place where it's every man for himself, where it's, I don't have a refrigerator, so I can't even, don't talk to me about saving food for the next 6 months. I don't have food tomorrow. I'm buying my food every single day. And so people are just out for themselves, and you're showing them, you're showing them how to care for each other. Mm-hmm. And so that's great to see. And so, at the end of the day, the projects matter because they impact a life. But the reality is, the projects are kind of an avenue through which you get into the house, mm-hmm. and through which you get into the conversation and the relationship. And that, again, is what I got to witness when I went with you guys in February 2020. I got to witness there were certain houses that you needed to go to, certain people that you wanted to see. And when we would walk into those houses, you would always have a story about a relationship, a loved one, an event, or something that happened, or you just knew. And that doesn't happen without being the kind of people who are fully invested in, this is the mountain village that God has called me to go and serve in. And so I'm in awe of your commitment to the people there, and that you get to pass that on, that ripple effect, and in loving the least of these and giving a cold water to someone who's thirsty in the way that Jesus would call us to, because when we serve the least of these, it's as if we're serving him.
The work projects are important because they improve the health and living conditions of the people exponentially. They are the avenue on which we can invite ourselves into someone's home. And while we were there, use that opportunity to share the love of Christ with all that we meet, not only just through our words, but through our actions and how we respond to one another and how they see us working together for the common goal. You know, the interest that we take and the time that we take to play with the kids. The work projects are important because when we bring missionaries in, they want to do something. You know, well, they want to go home and be able to say, this is something that I was able to accomplish. And through time, I mean, we all started off that way. Like, it was very much a numbers game. You know, how many stoves can you get done today? How many floors can you get done today? I can get done more than you can. You know, a very fun competition. But at the end of the day, what's really important is the number of people that you've interacted with. And the number of people that every house before we leave, we ask to pray with a family. That's something specific to moving mountains. We wanted to make sure that when we come, we pray before we begin. And then when we leave, we ask the family, can we pray with you? Is there anything in particular that you would like us to pray for? And those are just beautiful moments that you can share with a family, hardships and suffering and, you know, hopes and dreams for their children and those sorts of things. That's where it is. But the work projects, I mean, they do allow us that opportunity to come in and spend some time.
Amen. And that's one of the things when I was with you guys, we went from house to house and we met people, right? And I remember this one house, I was reminded of the importance of cultural sensitivity or just love, like, because remember we sat down, we were eating something. There's a lot of people when not just Guatemala, I've been to Honduras, I've been to Haiti, I've been to Mexico on mission trips, and they drink a lot of Coca-Cola down there. And so it's funny because you go to this house and they have dirt floors and, you know, and living in a very small house. And then they run over and they break open a brand new bottle, a 2-liter bottle of Coca-Cola, and they're giving everybody drinks of Coke. And so, and it was at this house that had a small avocado farm down outside of town. And we were sitting there and there were 4 or 5 of us and we're sitting there enjoying our Coca-Cola. And I had brought with me a can of mandarin oranges with a pop top. And I pulled that out and I showed it to you, Lisa. And I was like, "Hey, look at this." And you looked at me real quietly, like, "Please tell me you are not going to eat that in front of these people."
I remember this.
I said, "No." I said I was gonna ask you if it was okay if I gave it to them because I just brought one with me. You're like, "Yes, that would be better." I said, "Yeah, okay." I was trying to be sensitive here. But there's a lot of things to learn and a lot of good times with those cultural crossovers and just meeting amazing people. The thing I'm always reminded of whenever I guess I step out of your normal and you're in places where people are the same as you by and large, you find out that ultimately we really are all the same. We really, we cross over cultures, cross over languages, geography, everything, nationality. And at the foundation, we're all the same because we're all made in the image of Christ. And there are so many pieces of our humanness that are one race. We're all together, one human race, one human experience, and created in God's image. And so I think that's something that a lot of people need to be reminded of. People need to learn that. Like, hey, we really are all the same. We're all God's children. And so we love each other. And you guys are just showing that in a beautiful way. And so impressed, proud of you, happy to know you, and work alongside you wherever I can, and just seeing God work in your life. Unless you have some other stories, I just want to, and I know you have a plethora of stories, but just to kind of by way of wrapping things up, you've been doing Moving Mountains since 2014, and it was around 2019, I think, that you officially became part of the, supported by the church, kind of officially under our 501c3 and all that. So we we talk about what you do. We do fundraisers for what you do, and we encourage members of our church to go on this trip to find an opportunity to go, because it's going to be it's going to be impactful for your own faith, but it's also a way of living out your faith and loving people. So how can somebody that's listening or watching this find out more about it? And if they want to go on a trip, or if they want to donate to the cause and be a part of what you're doing here?
Well, we would just hope and pray that people who are listening to this will be inspired to go and serve somewhere in the world, whether it's across your street, taking care of an elderly person across your community in an inner city mission. But we would also hope that some of the people that we know and love will take that step of faith and get on a plane and come with us. Because I've never met a person who has regretted coming along on a mission. You do not have to sign up for the 10-year plan. I've said that before. Come once, let the Lord work, and see what the Lord can do in your life, because you will never regret that. We do have a website. The church has that link. I think we have the link on the One Life Church site. We do have a Facebook page that's called Mountains Will Move, because Moving Mountains was taken over by a construction company, I believe. People can donate to our projects.
Literal.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. People can donate to specific work projects. We do have that link where you can select your drop down if you really want to be, supportive of Bible school. We do a huge Bible school program every year. We hope to be back. The last 2 years we've done Bible school in homes. We've done home visit Bible schools because we weren't allowed to gather people together. But this year that there are not restrictions on that. So we hope to get back to our regular size Bible school with a couple of hundred kids, and that's always pretty fantastic. Yeah. And but people can donate to specific work projects. People can help to support a volunteer. If you know somebody who wants to come along and you want to help them shoulder that cost, you can do that as well. We've never been able just to write the big check and go. I wish we could. I wish, maybe we should go to Dave Ramsey's planning financial piece.
It's nice in some ways to write the big check and go, for sure. That would be great. But at the same time, it's nice to know you're not going alone.
Well,
it's nice to know there are people with you, right?
Well, you do, because you are carried by the people who are sending you. And I can't tell you the number of people who will say to us, I am physically unable to do this. Will you go and work for me?
Yeah.
Will you work in my place? And you are just sustained by this energy that you are carrying with you, and carried, of course, on the prayers of the countless people who pray us through our week. And so, if anything, we hope that anybody who's listening to this will just pray. Pray for the people that we love. Pray for our team. Pray for those who are nervously trying to decide, is this the year that I want to go or not? We would just love to have people come and experience this with us and just see a little bit of the world through the eyes of the Lord, because it is just an incredible experience.
And I think we've established it's not about the numbers, but what are your rough totals on projects?
Yeah. Rod, you want to... We should actually figure that out someday.
Wrap it up with some statistics.
Yeah.
Now, these were the pretty accurate numbers from Moving Mountains. It began in 2014. So far, we've been able to do roughly 60 concrete floors, 60 different homes. Our Vacation Bible School outreach was roughly 1,200 children. 120 sets of bunk beds. We have just surpassed the 1,000 mark for the number of roofs that we have repaired. Wow. Since the pandemic, one of the projects we started were some hot meals, because they were not able to have their traditional Christmas meal. We were able to help with that. They will also have one hot meal in July that we have provided. So these families are probably only having 2 hot meals a year, but we have been able to do that now, to provide about 10,000 total hot meals for these families. Our food delivery was roughly 5,000 families over the years with 68 people, which was an outreach of nearly 40,000 people that got hungry people. They got food. approximately 72 families got self-contained water tanks that really that help them provide clean water, keep the mosquitoes and everything out of the water. It's just so much more healthy for them. We've had a medical clinic for 2 years. We've done that, but we've also done home visits for medical needs also from time to time when needed and when we can. We did do a chicken delivery one time where we provided chickens for families.
Living chickens.
Living chickens.
We delivered. We bought a special chicken that they told us about that would pretty much scavenge for things around the house. Didn't require a lot to eat, but it produced an egg every day for the family. And protein is really lacking in their diet. We thought that would really help with that. We only did that one time. The feedback on it was the chickens were good, but they really liked the bunk beds for the kids, or the roofing projects and things. So we go with what the villagers, say, and what is most important, what is most need for them.
Yeah.
And that toy delivery, I think we kind of forgot about that. There's probably about 800 kids over the last 3 Christmases that have had a toy delivery. Wow. So, I mean, the numbers, like you said, they're pretty incredible when you think about it, wow, we really did all of that. But it doesn't pale, it pales in comparison to the number of people that we just now consider to be our families and our friends and the families we've prayed with and prayed over and prayed for. Those are the numbers. The team members who come questioning their faith and return home. Maybe they've tagged along with a spouse just because the spouse said, you need to come with me. And they go home and they say to their wife, I don't know who this Jesus is, but I need to know who Jesus is because I saw Jesus in my team and I saw Jesus on the mountain. Tell me about how I can invite him into my life. We've had team members come questioning their faith and going home, realizing that God loves them and that Jesus loves them, and they have the power now to take that love and impact other people. Those, to me, those are the numbers that matter the most.
That's what it's all about. You've impacted tens of thousands of lives and individual people in those ways. So you're not just helping people on the mountain. You're not just helping people that go on your trips, but you're actually contributing to increasing the roll calls at the gates of heaven, and that's sharing Christ with people, and they're seeing it and coming to salvation too. So that's incredible. I love it, and so I honored to be a part of the story. So thank you for everything that you do, and I trust that God's just going to continue to bless you all along the way. So
thank you for your time.
Thank you, friend.
Thank you for having us.
In the darkness, I will be your light. Every word said